I head up the research function into industrial and logistics property at Savills, and part of my job is to collect data on the property market and then analyse that and use that for various reasons. One of the main reasons is just for our market report, so people know what's going on in terms of take-up, supply, rental levels, demand. And another part of that, and this is just a bit of shameless self-promotion for the slides, but we use that data in various projects as well. So I was presenting to the board of a 3PL recently, using this data to explain to people that the property market is not necessarily what it was 30 years ago in terms of being able to source sites, to source warehousing, and to locate your operation where it is. I've often said that property is the forgotten part of the supply chain, and actually it's going to become even more important as we go forward. And this is one of my favorite slides. I've been using this for a while, and in a way what it does is it shows the complexities of the supply chain. I've borrowed this from Capgemini, and it's a light-hearted way of looking at what's going on: planes, trains, trucks, warehouses, and the key point really is that there's property in all of these steps at the NDCs, at the consolidation centres, at the last mile, high street. All of it requires property in some way, shape, or form. So Peter has commissioned us to actually do a piece of work that states what is the size of the UK warehousing built stock at the moment, who occupies it, how big is it, and crucially, is it fit for purpose in the new world that we've found ourselves in and that we've discussed yesterday, last night, and today. So, just to basically what we'll try and do today is just 5 minutes on the headlines that I've pulled out of this data. This, in turn, will go, hopefully, with Peter into a UKWA white paper that we'll publish, we'll use for lobbying purposes, and take forward in the press, seminars, events, and so on. So that just reiterates the brief that Peter gave me. And what I'm going to do now is caveat myself slightly in terms of the data sources that we've used. What we've done is we've effectively taken data from the Valuation Office for warehousing in the UK over 100,000 square feet. And I downloaded about 5,000 records from their database, and I've gone through them line by line. Probably comes as no surprise that the public data isn't that accurate. What we've tried to do is look at the tenants, look at the size, and classify things. So I'll talk about that moving forward as well. What I've excluded, just for points of clarification, I've excluded large manufacturing units, I've excluded car factories, I've excluded open storage, but what I have included is big warehouse campuses where you may have 2 or 3 warehouses all on the same site that make up a bigger site as well. So, the largest warehouse in the UK is about 1.5 million square feet, located in the Midlands, and just for an idea of scale, that's roughly 36 football pitches. And Peter, a pint, if you can guess which football pitch that is. One that's been mentioned many times in this last couple of days. So, it is the Ricoh Arena in Coventry, one of the finest football stadiums in the country. Has only sold out once, by the way, and that was for Bon Jovi, but that's a different event altogether. So, yes. So, taking into account all of these warehouses over 100,000 square feet, how much product are we left with in the UK? We are left with 420 million square feet of stock in the UK. Over 100,000 square feet. What I've done on this chart is just break it down by area. And we've talked about the Golden Triangle. We've talked about, Peter in his address before the break, talked about the Southeast. What's interesting, you can see the East and West Midlands accounting for almost 90 million square feet and 65 million square feet, respectively. But then, actually, if you look at the population centres of the UK, if you were to add the South East and Greater London together, that's accounting for 90 million square feet of warehousing in the UK. Now, none of this is really a surprise. It backs up the hunches that we already have. But what it is allowing us to do as an industry is fight our case and say this is what is here, this is what it does, and give the industry a greater voice moving forward. Now, going back to this, I got this stat from a brilliant website called anareathesizeofwales.com. If you ever want to, journalists who compare things, lengths to double-decker buses and the height of the Nelson's Column and Albert Hall, that website does it. So how much is 420 million square feet? Well, it equates to the size of Tuvalu in the Pacific. I'm not sure I'd want to put a warehouse there because it looks beautiful, but that's roughly the area, and 0.01% of Wales is warehousing. So just to give you an idea of scale. What I've then done is, where the tenant is known of these warehouses, I've categorised them by various different sources. This is the 2010 valuation, so I've looked at high street retail, 3PL and transport companies, haulage companies, storage companies. I've looked at food retailers, manufacturers, food service, that's production of food, companies like 3663 or other agricultural food producers, Bakkavor were mentioned earlier. I've looked at wholesalers, I've looked at parcel mail. Interestingly, there was quite a lot of data for online retailers, pure play retailers, Amazon, ASOS, making up an interesting but small proportion of total warehouse stock in the UK. And then I've put other at the end. That's stuff that doesn't really have an easy categorization in terms of this. Records management, waste management, data centers, other uses of big warehousing space in the UK. And again, it's not necessarily a surprise in terms of what the data's showing. It's proving what we already suspected. High street retail accounting for 90 million square feet of property. Food distribution accounting for 60 million square feet of property. I wonder, when the rating valuation is done again, what the online retail proportion will be, going from 2010, 2012 to 15, 2017. One to look at, I'm sure. What I've done here is just put the dominant sector. And again, this is not necessarily a surprise in terms of food retail, high street retail dominating. What is interesting, however, is that high street retail, clothing, apparel, has a northwest and Yorkshire dominance. Food retail has a southeast dominance. What is more interesting is if you look at who's second and who's third in all of these regions. So automotive is the second biggest sector in the West Midlands. Food service and production is the second biggest producer or second biggest occupier of storage in the east of England and also the southwest of England. Again, not a surprise with the history and the infrastructure that we've heard talked about in other sessions today. And this just breaks it down. You can see there the east of England accounting for about 10% of food service, high street retail, Yorkshire and the Humber, the northwest. Again, if we looked at automotive, that would be a different story. If we looked at manufacturing, the northeast and Wales would have a part to play in this graph as well. What I've then done is answering one of the initial questions that Peter put to me. Where are the massive warehouses, units over 500,000 square feet? Well, again, not necessarily a surprise, but over 40 units over 500,000 square feet in the East Midlands, 30 in the West Midlands. What I do think is interesting is if you look at, again, the South East and London combined, actually making up a huge proportion. We've talked about the pressures on land and development, particularly in the South East, and the pressures of population growth in the South East, servicing convenience retail, servicing online delivery, servicing Argos are hoping to do same evening delivery if you order by 7 p.m. So all of this is going to put huge pressures on land moving forward. And guess what? There isn't much land. There's not a lot left. So I can talk about this, and Steve will as well in his presentation moving forward. And again, let's look at the square footage, but let's actually look at the volume of units. The chart here, the donut on the left-hand side, what that says is that 57% of units by unit count, so this is the actual number of warehouses in the UK, 57% actually fall between the 100,000 to 250,000 size band. Whereas actually, if you change that to look at the area, the physical volume occupied, actually that equates to only 31% of the actual square footage, and again 8% for 1 million square foot units and above. So how is the industry going to adapt to what we've talked about in terms of maybe less big warehouses in the Midlands and more smaller units on the edge of conurbations, so on and so forth. So this is something to be aware of as well. And as I kind of edge towards the end of these initial highlights from the research, this is just saying that the amount of new development is beginning to rise. Now, on one hand, this looks great. You're seeing an exponential growth in new warehousing being constructed for occupiers. And actually, I mean, it looks great, but it's only about 4.5 million, 5 million square feet. If you think that take-up levels were, I don't know, 31, 32 million square feet, which Steve will, I'll hand over to Steve to talk about, this isn't really enough at all. So you as logistics practitioners need to be aware that the property market isn't being as reactive as you might expect, as it may have been in the past, and you will have to factor in these timescales into your decisions, your searches, where you want to locate, and how you want to occupy space in the future. So a couple of points just to finish on as I hand over to Steve. And again, going back to one of the research questions that Peter put to me is well, is this built stock, this 422 million square feet, is it fit for purpose? Well, some of it is really old. And the legislation, which we'll hear about later through the legal side, is actually fit for occupation come 2018, 2019. We've heard about online retail. Well, one of the big things for online retail is the ability to have a lot of car parking spaces, because you may have 3,000-4,000 operatives working in a unit at any one time. Okay, that's fine. We'll build a car park. But you need more land. Where's the land coming from? Are we going to see more innovation in the design of buildings? Are we going to have to see, dare I say, in certain markets, double-decker warehousing, which our visitors from Asia will be very familiar with in Hong Kong and Japan? Will we see that in certain areas in the UK? Is that an area of best practice that the international organisations can work together on? And then just another, we've heard about EU legislation. You can always rely on the Daily Mail to calm things down, but a monster mega truck taking over our roads. This has a profound impact on warehouse design as well in the future, because we'll need bigger yard space. Does that, again, mean the stock that we have is fit for purpose? How much additional land will be needed? What does that do to your property costs as well moving forward? So that's just a snapshot of the work that Peter's commissioned. This will all be coming together. If you've got any observations on analysis of this data that you think will be useful, just send me an email. My contact details are on the first slide, and let me know. So with that, over to Steve.